They said, "We don't want you at the wedding." I stayed silent, heartbreaking, watching my son walk away without me. And 3 days later, a card arrived begging for my love while showing me everything I had sacrificed was ignored. My name is Jonathan Miller, and I am 72. This story begins on the coldest morning I have ever known. The sky above St. Augustine Church hung heavy and gray, like a blanket that had forgotten how to let the sun through. I stood hesitantly at the base of the church steps, clutching a small invitation that had somehow never reached my hands. The bells rang softly across the empty street, a gentle summon that echoed through the chilled air, inviting people inside. My breath formed slow, fragile clouds that dissolved into the morning frost. Snow drifted quietly from the sky, settling on my coat like silent ash. At the door, a young man smiled politely, holding a clipboard close to his chest. He asked for my name, and I told him, Jonathan Miller. He nodded, scanned the list once, then again, and the subtle lines of his face shifted. "I'm sorry, sir. Your name is not on the list." The words fell lightly, almost gently, but they landed like stones in my chest. I thanked him and stepped aside, feeling the weight of a lifetime in that moment. All my years working with steel and machinery could not compare to the crushing reality of being excluded from my son's wedding. Through the frosted glass, I could see the warm glow of life continuing without me. Guests removed their coats, shook hands, laughed softly. Dylan stood near the altar, adjusting his tie, radiating confidence and charm, surrounded by people who seemed to belong to another world. I longed to feel proud, but pride feels strange when the heart is numb and cold. I leaned against the railing, letting snowflakes land on my shoulders, remembering how different winters had felt when Margaret was alive. We wrapped Dylan in thick scarves, built crooked snowmen in the yard, and she would tell me that he would grow into a man who carried warmth wherever he went. I believed every word. After her passing, life became a series of sacrifices. I worked double shifts to pay for Dylan's school, skipped meals to keep his lights on, and told myself every ache in my back was worth it. I convinced myself love meant giving without question. Years later, Dylan introduced me to Alexis, bright, polished, city-savvy, and at first, she charmed me. But soon, subtle distances appeared. She teased me about my old truck, laughed at my cooking, made comments that left me shaking my head quietly. Dylan smiled along with her. I smiled back, pretending it didn't hurt. The distance spread quietly, like a shadow across the table where we sat together. I helped them. I covered part of their house down payment silently, never asking for credit. I thought love was about giving, not noticing how much you lose in the process. 2 nights before the wedding, Dylan sent a message. "Hey, about the ceremony. The small, just family. Hope you understand. No love, just form." I stared at the screen, feeling the ache deep in my chest, and then I found myself outside the church, watching Alexis walk down the aisle. Her white dress shimmered under the chandeliers, the music rose, and people stood around her. I wanted to be there, to see my son begin his new life, but my feet refused to move. The young man at the door gave me an awkward look, then turned away. Snowflakes melted on my gloves, and I whispered quietly to myself, "You did your best, John. You really did." I walked down the steps alone, the bells echoing faintly behind me. Some doors never open, and that morning, I realized my place was no longer needed in Dylan's world. 3 days later, a card arrived. Thick ivory paper, formal, my name printed correctly, but the handwriting was not Dylan's. Inside, only a short printed note read, "Thank you for your continued love and support. With gratitude, Dylan and Alexis." No ink, no signature. Jonathan sat at the kitchen table, the card trembling slightly in his hands. Not from anger, but from quiet understanding. The house felt too big for one person, yet filled with memories too heavy to ignore. Margaret's photograph smiled from the mantel, and I whispered, "You tell me not to take it to heart." I poured a cup of coffee, the same brand Margaret and I drank when Dylan was small. I remembered every sacrifice, every late night, every canceled vacation. Love had once felt weightless, but looking back, I saw how it had slowly become a one-way burden. Dylan walked free while I carried the weight. The phone buzzed. A bank reminder. Automatic payment for Dylan's house. I sat and opened my file drawer, reviewing every bill, every transaction paid silently over the years. Dylan believed he had paid for everything, but I had carried the burden. I called Thomas Gray, my lawyer of 30 years. "It's time," I said quietly, "to move forward with what we discussed. Details, paperwork, signatures, timelines." I directed everything to the foundation. House, investments, all of it. When I hung up, I did not feel anger or triumph, only a deep, settled tiredness. Outside, the sky had turned ashen. First snow melted into slush. Life moved quietly, as did love, often unnoticed until it was gone. That night, I opened my leather journal and wrote slowly, "I'm not angry anymore. I'm done trying to earn love. I gave what I could. Now I'll give the rest to something that can still grow." Dylan woke up weeks later to find mortgages unpaid, bills stacked like tiny red flags. Panic creeped in. Alexis screamed, demanding answers. He could give none. All the comfort and stability he had assumed belonged to him had been built on my invisible hands. Job pressures, bank notices, foreclosure warnings. Every shield had vanished. He called me. I did not answer. Silence was my answer. Days passed, anxiety mounted, and he finally understood the lessons I had tried to impart all his life. When Alexis announced she was pregnant, Dylan drove to me, rain soaking his coat and hair. I let him in. He sat, trembling, confessing his mistakes, his ignorance, his fear. I spoke slowly, calmly. "Son, life shows us what we refuse to see. Love without boundaries can break men. Learn to teach respect, not dependence." Rain tapped against the windows like quiet applause. I guided him, offered words, but let him stand on his own feet from there. I walked out into the rain without an umbrella, letting it wash away the past, carrying only quiet peace. 6 months later, the ocean became my companion. I lived in a small house on the California coast, teaching orphans how to build bridges, watching laughter fill spaces once empty with silence. One afternoon, Thomas arrived, handing me a letter from Dylan. He wrote about loss, hard work, and his new baby girl. He wrote about understanding, gratitude, and the man he was trying to become. I did not cry. I listened to the ocean, let forgiveness be carried by the wind. I closed my eyes, let the sunset glow on my face, and forgave everyone, including Alexis. Later, a boy ran up with a model bridge, asking for guidance. I smiled, showing him how to place supports, saying softly, "A boy once forgot his name taught me this." The waves whispered, and the world felt whole.